Welcome, everybody, to the Yes Labels podcast. We've been off for a few weeks, but we are back with a vengeance. I'm Justin Clark, and guest hosting with me today is Nick Trainer. Say hi, Nick.
Hi, everybody.
So before we start, as always, if you like this podcast, like it, follow, subscribe to it, do whatever you have to do. It'll be the most important thing you do today. That I can assure you. Well, probably not. But either way, like, follow, subscribe. So, Nick, what do we have for the group today on the podcast?
I think you and I are going to get into some polls a little bit later, but first we have a interview with Senator Markwayne Mullin of the great state of Oklahoma. Our firm obviously was lucky enough to do work on his race. He's a really good man. I think he has a very unique perspective. And, I look forward to hearing from him.
Excellent. Well, let's jump right in.
All right. Senator Markwayne Mullin joining us. Senator, it was an honor to get to work with you on your campaign for the U.S. Senate. I think one of the most fascinating things that I encountered spending time with you and your family was your background before you entered public life, before you entered public office. The entrepreneurial spirit you have and the drive you have. Can you just tell folks here in DC a little bit about what makes you tick and who you are as a person, not as a politician?
Well, first of all, you want to say it's an honor. I mean, we probably need to discuss that a little bit more if you think that was an honor. Because I distinctly remember you might get frustrated with me a few times, but I probably had it coming. But that's called a campaign, right?
That's right. That's right.
What drives me really is the idea of the idea of quitting, the idea of failure. When I first started, when Christy and I first started plumbing and with the plumbing business, it wasn't the fact I wanted to be a plumber. That was never aspiration of mine. That was never something I was like, I'm going to be a plumber. I'm going to quit college, walk away from a wrestling scholarship, marry my wife at 19 years old. She's going to be 18 and she's going to be cheering and she's going to drop out of college too. And we're going to start a plumbing business. That was not exactly what we were thinking at the time. But it was out of necessity, is out of that sense of responsibility. My dad needed help. He always instilled a really strong work ethic, and quitting just isn't even something that was even in our vocabulary. The idea of quitting meant I was going to get my butt beat by my dad at a young age, and so when he needed help, my wife of 18 years old at the time said, "Let's do this," and we went to work. It was when we got started, though, I realized that I'd just taken on the responsibility of helping support my mom and my dad. Even though my dad was still trying to work, he was sick, really sick, and wasn't able to work the way he used to be able to work. And we didn't even know why at the time. We found out why, but it took us about 3 years to get there. But our biggest driving factor was failure. I mean, you have people responsible for you, or that you're responsible for. You have bills that have to be paid, and you just simply get up and go. I laugh about it, but Christy and we never had a day off of work except one day. It was February 15th of 1998. We took 24 hours off. Other than that, we worked 7 days a week. Really, people say 7 days a week, 24 hours a day. Yes, we were a 24-hour service call company, and I did all the overtime, and Christy answered the phone most of the time. And on weekends, she would ride in the truck with me. And at night, she would sometimes go out on calls with me at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. But it drove us. It wasn't until I was 3 years into it that I had a company try to buy Christy and I out. And I say Christy and I because we did everything together. I mean, there wasn't one thing I'd be here if she wasn't there, with us, because she had a bigger vision than I did. I just wanted to work, and she wanted to make it into something more than just a plumbing shop. She wanted to make it into a company, and she had a different vision about it than I did. And so between the two, they worked out. But it was 3 years into it, we had a company try to buy us. And at that time, they offered us pretty good money. I mean, my wife and I, at that time I was 22 and she had been 21. Still had aspiration of going back to college. I still thought I could. I mean, I was still eligible to wrestle. I still had eligibility left, and we thought we could still go back. And they came and offered me $3 million for the company, which is huge. I mean, that was a long time ago. And then offered me a big salary to be their regional manager of this company. And at that time, I think we were making about $50,000 a week or $50,000 a week, $50,000 a year, because all the rest of the money was going right back into the company. And I remember talking to my dad about it, and we're sitting on the tailgate of my truck. And my dad said, "Well, Markwayne, what are you going to do? I mean, $3 million sounds like a lot of money, but that's not going to support you the rest of your life." To me, I felt like that'd support me forever. But he said, "It's not going to support you the rest of your life. I mean, if that's what you want to do, I support it. But you're still going to work, and you're going to tell me you're going to work for somebody else." And I remember when he told me that, I thought, huh. And so the first company we bought after that was 6 months later, and we just started growing. And then we got into every type of business you can think of after that. I mean, not just plumbing, but electrical and HVAC and environmental work. And she opened a restaurant, and we got into property business and development of property, and even got involved in a bank for a little while. And it just, everything you can think of, it just changed my mindset and said, let's go to work. And that was kind of what drove us, as you say, entrepreneurial drive. It wasn't traditional. It was just out of necessity that turned into a passion.
And I think what's also fascinating is what you built with Christy is then, threatened by the government, which is why you even think about entering public life in the first place, right?
Yeah. So back in 2009, 2010, first of all, this really wasn't threatened by the government, but this was my first run-in with, I guess you can say, bureaucracy to some degree. We started bidding big jobs. At first, we were just doing service and repair work. And then we started wanting to get into bigger stuff. So we started building or going after hospitals and large buildings, office buildings. But when we're building those, we're bidding against union shops. And we started winning the union shops. We started winning the bids. And once the contractor worked with us and wasn't working with the union shop, we used to kept that contract. And so they started coming after trying to unionize us. And at that time, I didn't realize how much authority unions have. I mean, basically, they can come into your place of employment. They can go right into a break room. Any door that's not open, that's open, they can go into. Any drawer that is containing an employee, they have access to. I mean, it was just the most crazy thing we've ever seen. And we finally beat them back. And I wouldn't say necessarily we beat them back. The employees that was working for me, they didn't want to be part of a union shop, and then they realized what they paid and realized we paid so much better. It was almost laughable. And then especially when you start talking about the benefit package. Plus, they have mobility to move up. When you're part of a union, you're kind of stuck. Meaning, what I mean by stuck is you can't ever become management. You can't ever become a manager. As soon as you become a manager when you're part of a union, then you get pushed. You can't be part of the union anymore. So there's no upward mobility. And when they figured all that out, they chose to stay. But I didn't realize how much authority they had through laws that was given to them through Congress. But then fast forward, and we had a company called Mullin Environmental where we treated water. And we had a shop that we had set up. The shop turned into a manufacturing place. We built fiberglass tanks. We built trailers, and we would ship these all over the place to small municipalities to help them be compliant with then the clean water standard that was in place prior to Obama coming into office. Well, during this period, they were everybody was talking about job packages. Republicans were talking about job packages. Democrats were talking about job package. Obama was talking about job package, and he remember at the time he was saying shovel-ready jobs. He had shovel-ready jobs. Well, the way they were creating those jobs is through regulation. They were regulating certain industries, certain standards put out there, or forcing people to do things, forcing people to build infrastructure that they may not need. And one of those was potable drinking water. And so when they started doing that, they changed the clean drinking water standard by just a little bit. I mean, less than 1%. And it basically regulated our equipment out of business. And so 1 week we're in business, it's growing, we're operating all over the place. And the next week I didn't really have to lay people off, but I was closing down that business and was going to bring people back in and put them in different companies that we had. Fortunately, at that time, Christy and I had enough companies that we could absorb the employees, but it wasn't what they signed up for. And I remember a guy that was talking, and it happened to be John Boehner, and I didn't know who John Boehner was because I wasn't political at all. It said that he had a package that created 5,000 jobs. And I laughed because that morning I was meeting with all my managers to start telling them to call the employees, to tell them they're either have to come in and we're going to put them inside of another company, or they're going to have to go find another job, one of the two. And I thought, you don't have a job package. You just cost about 100 jobs right here. And that was when my wheels really started turning about running for office, even though we didn't know even what office we talked about. In fact, the first office we considered was maybe running for labor commissioner for the state of Oklahoma, because it seemed like that went after jobs and trying to protect them. But then we were asked to run for Congress, and the first reaction was, heck no, not doing that. And doors started opening and things started happening. And the first political event I ever went to in my life is the one I stood up and said I was running for Congress. And at that time, I got asked if I'd vote for John Boehner for speaker, and I didn't know who he was. And so I said, it depends on who's running for him. I didn't run against him. I didn't know. I didn't have a clue. That's how naive and how ridiculous I was about politics, that I didn't know who the Speaker of the House was at the time.
Well, so when you got to D.C., you presumably encountered a lot of former lawyers mostly lawyers in the halls of Congress and around D.C. and
Right.
lobbyists. What were your first impressions coming from a background that's decidedly not that?
Well, actually, intimidation. You would think that I wouldn't be someone to be intimidated. I mean, because before I ran for office at the same time, I was competing all over the place in jiu-jitsu, and a former professional mixed MMA fighter. And you wouldn't think intimidation would actually enter your mind, but it did. It hit me actually like a ton of bricks. It was February 14th of 2013. I'm actually in the Capitol, because at that time I was still living in my office, or sleeping in my office. I wouldn't say living in my office, but I was sleeping in my office. And it was the first Valentine's that I had missed with Christy since we started dating, which we started dating in high school back in 96. And so I was kind of frustrated by it. I was upset, and I was having a pity party. I don't know if you guys ever had a self-pity party before, but I was kind of having a pity party to myself. And I know, Trainer, you've had pity parties to yourself, but I don't know if Justin has or not.
That's right.
It's most days. That's most days for Nick.
Every time if I would look in the mirror and I looked like that, I'd have a pity party. But anyway, that's another point. So that was me. I'm sorry about that.
It was. It's okay though. It's okay. Nick forgives you.
Yes, sir.
So, anyways, I'm sitting there, and I'm just complaining really to myself, and I'm like, Lord, what in the world am I doing up here? I mean, why? There's a lot of pretty talented people up here. What do I have to offer that they don't? I mean, they have, degrees from all these Ivy League schools, and they have all these, all this life experience. And what have I had other than, the experiences that we've had in life? And that's what hit me, is we have life experience. I may not have this education from MIT or Stanford or Harvard or whatever Ivy League school you want to name, but over the years we've created hundreds and thousands, not hundreds of thousands, but hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs. And we've employed these people, and we've dealt with the regulations. We understand what it's like. We understand the struggles. I mean, we've missed paying ourselves so we can make payroll. We've had to rob Peter to pay Paul before. We were day by day in COD on supply houses, and having to pay a guy named SK that had a total gas station to give me gas each day, but I had to go pay him at the end every day, and the only way I could pay him was by a credit card that I had to figure out how to get paid off every week, because I couldn't afford it and go any further than that. We've struggled, late at night trying to figure out how we're going to hire employees and losing employees because they quit or ones that you had to fire, and how hard that is, especially when you only have a handful of employees and you lose one of them, you've just lost 20% of your business. I mean, we've had those struggles, and I just thought, that's what I bring to the table. I bring experience that other people haven't dealt with, because when they talk about it in a theory perspective, they haven't lived it firsthand experience, and I've lived it firsthand experience. And let me tell you, you're going to be a lot more passionate about issues, and you're going to dig your feet in the ground a lot harder and a lot deeper when you've dealt with it firsthand, because you know exactly what the side effect is of whatever this regulation or whatever this rule or this law that they're trying to get through, what it's going to do. And when my mindset changed to that, I became a complete different person when it came to looking at legislation and holding these agencies accountable.
Yeah, no, I think it's a skill you definitely have, and one that was sorely missed up here. And I think we see more members coming in with more real world experience now. Transitioning a little bit, I want to talk about the people you represent, because I think, having spent some time in Oklahoma and having spent time, in much of this country, there's just a disconnect between what Washington, D.C. and the cable news hosts think people care about and what they actually care about. Can you tell us a little bit? Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, sir.
Well, no, it's true. They call this the bubble for a reason. It's not reality. And I'm not knocking people for staying here and living here. I could see where it can get infectious to where you want to be around this place. I honestly, I can see it. But there's a reason why I go home every single weekend. There's a reason why life is still, for me, in Oklahoma, is because this isn't reality. This isn't how real life works. You have most of the people up here work for a government agency of some degree. If you're not working directly for the government agency, you're working indirectly to them. And in real life, it's much different. Things move at a much different pace. You have more ripple effects. The farther you get away from here, the more effects it has when it comes to bureaucracy, when it comes to the regulation, when it comes to laws that are made. It's just a different world. And so when you're living in it every single day, you still have employees. Remember, we were fought for the first 4 years I was in office, fought every day with our company, saying that we needed to put our companies in blind trust. We needed to get rid of them. I had ethics violations filed against me, saying that I can't still advertise my own companies because I'd been advertising them since I was 20 years old. But all of a sudden, now that I'm in office, I can't still operate that way. They said that we were accused of doing everything underneath the sun, and then at the end of the day, I mean, I was audited for 4 years by the IRS and Department of Labor, and they left my office the day Trump was sworn into office, literally, and never filed one thing, never fined me for one thing, not a single thing. It was just strictly harassment because I was a member of Congress that had something they can go after. They want people here that have they're out of touch with the reality. They don't want people here, I truly believe, that actually has to still live in the same world. And when you still are dealing with that, I still run cattle. I still have a ranch. I still got kids. All my kids are in public schools. We're dealing with the public school education system because where we live, there is no private schools that you can go to. You deal with the real challenges that everybody else is dealing with. You have a different perspective. And I'm not knocking people that live up here, but you lose touch of reality. You lose what it's really like. And when you're dealing with people, they're not the stuff that's concerning us because it's the flavor of the week on the news. Is so far away from reality of what they're dealing with that it's literally almost laughable.
That's
I mean,
right.
some of the big issues that we're dealing with here, because the political rags that are writing about it at home, it doesn't even make any difference. I mean, they're living life.
That's right.
And they're living the effects, and that's all they care about.
That's right, Senator. That's really well said. And, one other quick question. You've been really generous with your time here, but, the types of people you're talking about that live in your state, the rest of the country for that matter, they represent kind of a new Republican Party that exists throughout the country, and it's changing. And the makeup of the Republican Party is changing. Who votes, and I'm just you've lived through this change as a candidate for office, through 2016, but really before that, and it continues to this day. This change, is it a good thing for the Republican Party? Bad thing, or just different, or what's your take on it?
I think we got a mix of both, and I know that sounds so political, but it really is. You have people that are so tired of lip service. They're so tired of the fire alarm being pulled. This is the most important election ever, or we must do this, or we must do this, because all they get to is fire alarms. All they get to is dealing with the world's on fire when they listen to the news, because if it bleeds, it leads. And people are just tired of it. And at some point you go, okay, I'm tired of this. I want action. And so they're looking for someone to fight. And I think that's the appeal of Trump, is because he's fighting them. It's not necessarily the love of his personality. It's the love of he's not going to deal with the bull crap that people are pushing that way. They're not. He's just going to say the way it is. I mean, the thing I had with the union boss by calling him out on his keyboard warrior antics. That thing, it went all over the place, and I didn't do that for publicity. I'm not looking for a fight. I have nothing to prove to fight somebody. I used to get paid to fight. I have zero desire to get in a brawl with somebody for the sake of just brawling with them. I don't need to prove my manhood to anyone. But the fact that I said it, and then it goes all over the place, and people are like, "Yeah, we're glad you did that." People need to be called out on that. It shows the mentality of people, that they're just sick of it. They don't even know what they want. They just want to fight. They want to be in the thick of it. And then on the other side of it, you have your moderate people, I guess what you would say, that they understand how it works, and it's going to go slow, and we just got to be methodical, and we got to take this step, and we've got to get there, and we've got to win the House back, and we got to keep the House, and we got to win the Senate back, and we've got to get the White House. By the way, if we don't get the White House, man, this world's over. This world's just over. It's just done. And when I tell those people, I'm like, hold on a second. You're telling me that if we don't do these things that we got to quit? Because failure is not an option for me, so I'm not going to fail. I don't believe in failing. I don't believe I'm going to win every time, but I believe I'm going to keep coming back until I do achieve victory. So I don't accept that. So what's the alternative? Because I can't control the outcome of every election. And if I could, then we wouldn't be in the situation we're in. So we have to understand that government was designed to be dysfunctional. And I know that sounds crazy, but it's true. And I think there's the frustration comes from the lack of education almost, because if you don't understand the way that our founding fathers set it up and why they set it up that way, then of course you're going to be frustrated with our government. We're not a dictatorship. There's not going to be one person that's going to make changes. They wanted it to be dysfunctional. They wanted it to move slow. That's the reason why they set up the House of Representatives and the Senate to require checks and balances, and then required one more step for the President of the United States to sign off on it before we could make any changes. What they didn't anticipate is executive orders starting to make laws. And I think those executive orders are what's frustrating people, because they move so much faster than Congress did. If we didn't have those executive orders, you wouldn't have this big swing in the economy. You wouldn't have this big swing in border policy. You wouldn't have this big swing when it comes to energy direction. You would have more stability put back into place, and you'd bring the temperature down, in my opinion, of people, because both sides are just fed up. They're just fed up.
That's right, sir. And with that, it was great to have you on, one of the best fighters our party has. And have a Merry Christmas with the family. Tell them all I said hello. Really appreciate, taking the time today.
Well, I appreciate that. Christy's sitting here with me. Of course, her eyes are closed because I've bored her to sleep. Because that's how much she gets involved in politics.
Blame Nick. Blame Nick. Blame Nick.
Yeah, it's all Nick's fault. But I would say Merry Christmas to you guys too. I mean that sincerely. I'm not a huge Christmas person, to be quite frank with you. I love Thanksgiving, because Thanksgiving you get around with your family, you get to eat. You don't have to get a whole bunch of gifts that you don't care about anyways, and pretend like you do. But I think Christmas this year could be a good opportunity for us all to just take a deep breath and understand. I mean, not to get preachy here, but understand what the season's all about. The season's about celebrating Jesus Christ's birth, right? And with that comes peace, joy, and hope and happiness. And I think we could all use a little bit of peace, a little bit of joy, a little bit of happiness in our life, and maybe even take it a little bit easy. Hopefully, we get out of here in DC on time. Maybe we get out this week. We're not here next week, and everybody can just kind of step back and enjoy people without talking politics for a little bit, and actually think that people are humans.
Amen. Couldn't say it better. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Merry Christmas, guys. Yeah. Bye.
That was a great interview with Senator Mullin, and it kind of leads into some of the stuff we want to talk about today. We are blessed to have a bevy of poll numbers out this week.
Jeez.
Yeah, a ton. When it rains, it pours with public polling. They should really get themselves on a different schedule. They'd probably get a little better news out of it. But not a lot has changed. Some things are changing, some things are staying the same. But I want to start kind of with one broad poll, and then we're going to narrow down and talk about some smaller states. Last week, Wall Street Journal poll, which comes out with regularity, assessing the general election. We are, and I'll start by saying we're going to do this in reverse order. We're actually going to start with the general election and then go into the primary. So for all those who want to talk about Iowa, we'll get there. Stay tuned. Stay on the podcast. But starting with the Wall Street Journal poll, like I said, they were in the field November 29th through December 4th. So very recent, very fresh. More bad news for President Biden. Good news for former President Trump. A Biden-Trump head-to-head. Donald Trump's leading Joe Biden 47-43. In the same poll in August, it was tied at 46. And in the same poll in April, President Biden was leading by 3 points. So some serious deterioration for President Biden vis-a-vis President Trump, and President Trump, frankly, moving up with his number, which is an important thing. I would add the news doesn't get much better to him when it's a multi-candidate field. When all the candidates, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Joe Manchin, Cornel West, Jill Stein, get in there. Former President Trump's lead extends to 6 points, which is, again, another telling sign that when the field gets bigger, those votes are breaking away from Joe Biden more than they're breaking away from Donald Trump. Nick, do you have any comment on the big one before I kind of get down into the states and start digging in?
I mean, my takeaway right now and where we're at is Biden's in a really bad spot, like a really bad spot. And it's, there's a couple factors that are leading into this, right? People, as much as the White House wants to pretend the economy is good, no one believes it. Immigration and the border still, I think last week we had the highest day of crossings.
And it's killing them in the polls, and they keep talking about it with this Ukraine aid bill they keep bringing up. It's insane.
I know. And the tightrope he is trying to walk on Israel. You look at this and you look at the numbers and you say, okay, well, President Trump is where he should be, right? This is the best polling President Trump's had, likely since he got into the race in 2015 against the likely Democrat opponent. But the problem for Joe Biden is Democrats, is real Democrats right now. They'll fight over the middle, and people that don't like either of them are going to make a decision in the fall of next year. So don't count on that too much. But the problem for Joe Biden in all of these polls lately has been Democrats just aren't there. Yeah. And I don't know how he gets them to return.
I don't know either. He's losing all the messaging doors and all the issue doors are kind of closing behind him right now, and they're left with a couple issues that, I'm thinking, abortion policy and, this vague threat to democracy thing, which I'm not sure is going to work for them, that they have left. But getting the tie back to Senator Mullin's interview before, At the same period of time, from November 29th to December 6th, CNN came out with surveys they did in Michigan and in Georgia. And I thought those numbers were pretty surprising and were newsworthy. I'm going to go through the top lines. But Nick, I think we want to talk about, as we go through these top lines, always have a mind towards what we were talking about with Senator Mullin about the changing nature of the Republican Party, because I think these two polls that they did really kind of show that. In Michigan, in the head-to-head, Donald Trump was leading President Biden 50% to 40%. In the multi-candidate field with all those candidates, that lead shrunk to 39 to 31, 8 points from 10 points within the margin. Not a huge number, not a huge change. And in Georgia, President Trump led President Biden 49 to 44, smaller margin. And that lead grew in the multi-candidate field from 5 points to 8 points. So this is in line with what we've seen in recent polling elsewhere. It's not, the Michigan number is very high. It's the highest I've seen.
Right.
But it's in line with President Trump, if the election's today, probably wins, and it's probably not particularly close. But Nick, I want you to talk a little bit about kind of the traditional Democrats and traditional Republicans and what we're seeing in this state, in both of these states.
Well, I think one of the interesting things as we look at President Biden struggling with Democrats, we know the types of right-leaning voters, independent right-leaning voters that are Trump skeptical, right? We know who these groups of people are, and there are probably aren't two better states to illustrate this split than Michigan and Georgia, right? Michigan, where you have working class, diverse population, is pretty down on Joe Biden right now. Whereas in Georgia, we are seeing right-leaning independents and maybe Trump skeptical Republicans saying, okay, we made a mistake in 2020 and they're coming home. We can look at these polls and say, well, there's others from other polling outfits done in these states that, show this much closer. But I mean, this is a good poll. They have a decent track record.
Yeah.
And I think it illustrates where we are at in both the former president and the current president's trajectory heading into November 2024.
I totally agree. And we've said it on this podcast before. You've said it a lot. We've said it since 2020. The voters that changed from 2016 to 2020 were white middle-class men in the suburbs, not women, which is kind of the conventional wisdom. And that's exactly the voter you're talking about in Georgia. And these are people that used to be reliable Republican voters that are now less so.
Right. And they're educated and they live in, suburbia with a Lululemon and a Whole Foods down the street. And they live a little bit of a different life than the voters in Oklahoma that Senator Mullin was telling us about.
That's right. Now, I will say this. I think these two states, too, they're interesting to me because both of them, Georgia and Michigan, are the win or loss there is, in theory, in complete control by the party in power. And what I mean by that is Michigan the Democrats have the ability to win Michigan outright, and the Republicans have the ability to win Georgia outright by turning out their votes. If the Democrats get a number that they need in Wayne County, which is Detroit, they win Michigan. Right. And Republicans can squeeze every vote they want to out of the rurals and out of the rest of the state. They can't win if the Democrats hit their number in Wayne. And for Republicans in Georgia, it's the opposite. Republicans, if they turn out their number in the rurals and in North Georgia, there aren't enough votes for Democrats in Fulton, Cobb, and DeKalb to overcome that number. So it's in the control of the party that's currently in power in those states. And the question is whether they can execute on that and do it.
100%. Couldn't agree more.
It's pretty incredible. And we saw that come to life in 2016, 2020, especially in Michigan. But it's always keep that in mind as we look at polls in Michigan and in Georgia. Now I want to go back in time in terms of the election calendar a little bit, because we also had a survey out of Iowa, the Seltzer poll, which is kind of the gold standard of polling in Iowa, was in the field for the Iowa caucuses, December 2nd through December 7th. And like I said, it's the gold standard of polling for Iowa. Not a ton of surprising info in this poll, but really good news for Donald Trump. And I'm going to go through the top lines right now. You had Donald Trump at 51%, Ron DeSantis at 19%, and former Governor Nikki Haley at 16%, and then everybody else in single digits. The thing that stood out to me in this, Nick, in terms of Donald Trump's numbers, it's the first time that we've seen him over 50% in a poll in Iowa this year, which indicates to me some hardening of support. He's always had a pretty high favorable rating, and this seems to tell us something about that. But what do you see from it? What are you thinking about?
No, 100%. That's the obvious takeaway. I think the other part of this is Governor DeSantis still isn't the one in Iowa, right? I think we've seen media and the DeSantis team talk about how he is the only one that can be competitive with former President Trump in Iowa. He's not. And the more that former Governor Haley strengthens in other states, which she is, right? She just picked up this new endorsement in New Hampshire. We know she's going to be in the game more than he is in South Carolina. The more Iowa voters that would prefer to move on from President Trump, a lot of them still like him, but are going to walk into caucus day and say, well, who's the one that can actually be in the game against him? And it's looking more and more like that's going to be Haley. The issue that I have with the DeSantis team is they've never figured out what this race actually was.
What do you mean by that?
Everyone enters a campaign, whether you're running for state rep or for president of the United States, and you have a theory of how you win. Their theory seemingly was, well, Ron DeSantis is a winner, right? Out of the gate, that was what they kind of went with. Yeah. And he's going to win because he's a winner, which is an interesting, we could do a whole hour on that alone. But they've, even through all of the changes that they've made to that team, they've still failed to figure out something that works. And you can say a lot about Nikki Haley from an ideological perspective and her ability to win in today's modern Republican Party. But here's the thing that that is definitely true in my eyes. They had a plan. They are executing on that plan, and it's working. Again, you can talk about whether she can win or even win a state, but they're at least executing what they set out to do. I still, to this day, don't know what Ron DeSantis set out to do.
Well, right. I mean, we've touched on this together. I'm not sure if we mentioned it on the podcast, but the only two campaigns for president on the Republican side that are actually running campaigns are the Donald Trump campaign and Nikki Haley's campaign.
That's right.
That's it. The DeSantis camp isn't. And I say camp because it's not really a campaign.
No. And you know, the SuperPAC and, you know, the whims of what's actually happening in the formal campaign, you know, aren't even aligned in a lot of circumstances.
Well, I mean, there's just open warfare between them in the press. It's wild. But your point about they haven't figured out what this campaign's about is totally right. And forgetting all the tactical and even strategic decisions they made, not having a rationale for why he should be president is like insane to me. They never thought they had to, I don't think. And I'm speculating.
No, it was like you're rolling out a new product and you're like, well, this product is the best, so you should buy it. But you didn't tell us what that product does.
Yeah, that's right. And and there's going to be a million autopsies on this thing, but this is why primaries matter. This is the vetting process where people decry American politics, but this lets you know if you can do it.
Well, and think about going back a year ago from now, right? When everyone knew that Ron DeSantis was going to enter this race.
Mm-hmm.
And the question that I think was burning here in DC was, can he actually put together a team that can execute a true plan, right? This is a guy that historically has trouble keeping a team together over his political career. And the trust factor that he puts into operatives is reportedly very low. But running for president is not something you can do on your own.
That's right.
And it's something that you have to do with a team. And again, like the only folks doing that are former President Trump and Nikki Haley.
That's right. So some other news this week on the debate front. The RNC monopoly on debates crumbled this past week. And now the networks are jumping in, and it seems like CNN's having trouble putting this together because Governor Haley, who is prior to this said, kind of been the debate anytime, anywhere candidate, mostly with respect to former President Trump, won't commit to the Iowa debate with Ron DeSantis. He's all in, presumably. If you're advising her, what do you tell her to do?
Yeah, this is a tricky one. I think it's a no for me. We've seen from the debates that have occurred that the risk reward isn't really there as it's been in previous cycles. No one's really getting debate pops, and maybe that's a product of
viewership and
right.
Trump not being there. Yeah,
but no one's getting that like big moment where you go and you run after when Newt stood on stage and attacked the media and then had his 3 weeks of fun. No one's getting that right now. So when you're weighing the risk reward for Nikki Haley, her game's in New Hampshire, right?
Yeah.
That's where she has her flag planted. That's the be all end all of her campaign. Because if it doesn't happen in New Hampshire, it won't happen in South Carolina.
Yeah.
So is that risk worth it for her to get on stage?
Well, what's the risk? What's the downside for her?
Ron DeSantis isn't bad at this. And he's done a fairly decent job, especially in this last debate, of holding her feet to the fire on some of her policy choices back when she was governor.
Yeah.
And she
caught her out in some lies about her. Yeah.
Right. Didn't land the final blow on any of them.
And that's probably because of multi-candidate field up on stage. It's kind of, that stuff can wash out.
Right. So if you're Nikki Haley, do you go on stage one-on-one with a guy that definitely has just a better record in a conservative primary situation than you, and that has proven that he's willing to call you out on very specific things that have occurred? That's the risk.
Yeah. I think I'm a yes for her to do it. And here's why. I don't care about being called a hypocrite for not debating. That doesn't bug me. The Iowa thing doesn't, her game is definitely New Hampshire right now, for sure. Yes, the debate will be an Iowa debate and it will be about Iowa. I just don't think that somebody who is a distant second in New Hampshire and, at 16% in Iowa and is trying to get some momentum going off of this stuff should ever turn down being on stage. And the risk reward piece, I don't know Governor Haley very well. I've seen everybody perform, and those risks are going to be there. But that's where like preparation and working on this stuff can really come through, and maybe you get a chance to create you just don't have many of these opportunities to get on national TV and to get on CNN and to be able to fight your way into second place. And if you throw that long pass and you connect and you get those points up and you start taking some out of your opponent's hide, I think the opportunity's there. I think the risk is super high. And the risk is high that she could actually let Ron DeSantis take votes from her. But I think you got to do it. I think you got to do it.
Yeah. There's a really good argument to be made on this.
Yeah, both. I get both. I get both arguments. I think it's hard too. I think she's losing the public relations fight on it.
Yeah, but
I don't care.
We're 33 days until the caucus. Like, if people are spending time talking about whether they're debating on CNN, which our primary voter or caucus voters aren't really watching, it just means Trump's winning that day.
Yeah. That's right.
So, I don't know if that matters that much.
Nick, is there any other news this week that we're missing?
I caught a story, I think it was yesterday, maybe 2 days ago now. The Associated Press published a story that I think is going to go missed by some.
Oh, this is the SuperPAC story?
Yeah.
Yeah.
My eyebrows kind of perked up a bit. DeSantis campaign interactions with super PACs raised internal legal concerns, AP sources say. Now, the reason this was interesting was the Associated Press. And unless they've lost all ethics over there, they've got to have something.
Yeah, there's a source.
And that source can only be a handful of people. And this is like a real problem for the DeSantis team internally. Because whoever the sources are for this story, if they're burning the ships, you could say the beginning of the end for Ron DeSantis has been going on for a while now, but this is a marker.
Yeah, this one was weird to me too, and it was mostly because it can only be a handful of people that are the source for this, and it's the story is like an allegation of breaking the law.
Right.
Like they coordinated and it was illegal.
And it's like very senior people that this can be.
Yeah. So I'm with you. I think this story was like totally going to be missed. This is something that is going to get resolved like years from now.
Right.
Either in a criminal setting or most likely the Federal Election Commission. I think at some point, I think we all agree at some point the courts are going to come in and say, okay, this is all just like stupid fiction.
Right.
We need to get rid of these dumb arbitrary rules. But until then, this was like a major allegation by somebody who was pretty senior on the campaign side. It had to be from the campaign.
It's a huge crack.
Yeah.
It's a huge crack. And, it's kind of the state of where that team is at this point.
Yeah, there's just so much infighting, so much stuff. Well, Nick, you did a good job this week filling in for Bill. I give you a BB plus.
A BB plus?
Yeah, I think it's pretty good.
I'll take it.
First ever podcast.
Yeah, they normally don't let me talk on media.
I don't blame you. I don't blame them being me. But yeah, them. Anyway, thanks everybody. As always, like, subscribe, follow us, do whatever you got to do. And until next time, thanks everybody for listening.